This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring the program. Today we go behind the headlines with Brevard Public Schools Superintendent Desmond Blackburn, who, by way of full disclosure, is my boss. But he is a boss who expects straight talk and probing questions, and that's what we do here. Superintendent Blackburn, welcome to the studio.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Your game plan for Brevard Public Schools has its own hashtag, people, process, performance. Mm-hmm. We're definitely in performance mode here.
Sure.
But performance depends on people.
Absolutely.
And the headlines about people lately have focused so much on union contract negotiations, right. Some teachers deciding to teach only to, or work only to what is called for in their contracts. Sure. From the superintendent's point of view, how do you size up teaching and the profession and performance right now in Brevard Public Schools?
So go back to the hashtag you just mentioned, right, Matt? As many of us know, when I got here almost now 3 years ago, staff morale, teacher morale was a huge issue to tackle. And I thought that listening and learning, trying to find the root cause of the morale issue was a good pathway to take, right? And absolutely, in that listening and learning, I heard we need increased compensation. I've heard that. And it is a valiant, appropriate cry, okay? In addition to that, I also heard we want respect, we want appreciation, we want value, we want time, we want relief of some of the evaluation and other evaluation and assessment. We want those things as well. So in thinking of all of that and knowing the kind of work that we have to do towards our performance indicators, just try to package what I know to be good for an organization, and that is long before we consider performance metrics, we need to discuss and collaborate and come to common agreement on what the how is, right? That's the process. But even before that, we need to really, really understand the value of building deep relationships of respect and collaboration and clear, transparent communication. So that sort of birthed people, process, performance.
There's been a number of agreements with Brevard the Brevard Federation of Teachers to do things such as scale back on the very complicated performance evaluations. I know there's some language that was agreed to about better conditions,
right.
Comp time, those kinds of things.
Sure.
You've been in school districts for a very long time. You were a teacher yourself at one point.
22 years.
Do these kinds of contentious moments threaten to derail hard work that's been done to marshal morale, or does it tend to go away after once terms are agreed to and raises are made, that kind of thing?
Here's what I think, based on this experience and what I've seen. What we're going through right now has been part of the landscape in our nation, at the state level, at individual, local, district levels, right? Because as a nation, we just have not found the sweet spot to be able to compensate our educators consistent with the educators' contribution to society. And so this tension has been around for quite a long time. Does it go away? I don't think it goes away, right? I do not think that the child's best interest is ever served when the adults in the child's life are at odds, right? And so, no, I don't think the negative impact really goes away.
Let's talk about a couple of the other priorities I know the school board has set, and in some ways, the money that's being spent on some of these new priorities, it's there, it's competing for those scarce dollars, but I think the public ought to know about them as well. Sure. You're reopening a school in Titusville. South Lake was closed during a dark time for Brevard when the shuttle program went away and we lost students. Mm-hmm. Now it's being reopened, only differently as a choice school.
Right.
Explain.
So that goes back to the listening and learning around the community. First of all, thank you to every small group, large group, individual person, church, Rotary, chamber, you name it, that have allowed me to come in and just listen. And none of those sessions, and the people out there watching this video can attest to it, none of those sessions are ever one line, one item conversations. I will tell you, salary increases have always, it's a mainstay in the conversation, absolutely. There are other things that people have appealed to myself, to board members on. When I look at the conversations I've had over the last couple of years, sort of in North Brevard, right, the wounds from the school closure process, they're alive and well. And so having an opportunity to reopen South Lake, I think is phenomenal, and I think it is consistent with a lot of what North Brevard residents have asked of the district, and primarily their North Brevard champion up there, Mrs. Belford, our past board chair. In addition to that, something else that, speaking of that region, North Brevard really asked for, right, is for us to take a really, really hard look, and again, going back to Mrs. Belford requiring us to take this hard look at the lack of equity that exists around choice programs based on geography.
Okay.
Not laying blame, not understanding a root cause, but just fair, objective analysis, seeing that there is a gap in choice programs in Northern Brevard compared to Central and South. One more piece I heard quite regularly was that the elimination of the corridor busing piece contributed to the inability for people, especially people who live in remote parts of our community, to access some of these programs, right? And so reopening of South Lake, we accomplished putting that school, back in the community. We accomplished closing the gap on choice programs, and we accomplished bringing not corridor busing, but regional busing, which will be there'll be far more opportunities for students to access programs throughout the district with transportation. So again, these pieces are, I believe, respectfully saying, Matt, feeding right into what community members, and many of them teachers, parents, and students, have asked us to do.
So Titusville will get something akin to a Freedom 7, a West Melbourne School of Science.
That's correct.
These kinds of choice programs that have been enormous sources of local pride for other regions in Brevard County, but Titusville just doesn't have that.
Absolutely.
You mentioned choice regional busing, complicated endeavor, but so how does that compare to just driving people to Edgewood or West Shore junior, senior high schools?
Well, first of all, we are really, really rapidly closing in on the notion of a contiguous boundary in a school system being what is accepted by all, right? The word choice is very, very popular and attractive to many, many people in our community, our state, our nation. So people want to have input into where they go to school. That said, these same people, they actually work for a living, right? And so if the school system is not participating in expanding transportation opportunities, then that absence of effort causes an immediate limit on what some students, what some families can access. And so, and again, thank you to community and staff members for opening our eyes to that void and really pressuring us to fill it.
When we come back, why the school superintendent donated his most recent raise for school supplies.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. My guest today is Brevard Public Schools Superintendent Desmond Blackburn. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you.
You just made headlines for donating a 1.5% raise, which you received along with the 790 other non-union members to a place that delivers school supplies. Explain that.
Matt, it's the epitome of a good, no, great thing by great people gone bad, right? And so let me just take you back to where we were before the holidays. We recently received sort of that impasse from the Brevard Federation of Teachers, and largely because of the finances, right, rejecting the 1.5%. We came to an agreement on all of the language pieces, right, the policy pieces. And so we were good there, but we were still at impasse because of resources. Our 1010 employee group, they voted on the 1.5% increase, and they voted it down. And so we headed into, I believe, the December 12 school board meeting with two of our employee groups basically rejecting the 1.5% raise. There was an item on that agenda to approve raises for, I believe, 1010 and 12-month employees. But at the time, after the vote from 1010, we thought it was prudent and consistent with the way things have been done in the past to pull that item from the board meeting, right? There were employees. Some of the 790 employees that are impacted there reached out to our board members and said, hey, when do we get, why do we have to wait sort of conversations? And so now I'm getting back to the great thing by great people, right? So the board members felt that and had a discussion and decided, no. Like, we want to give this to those 790 employees. They were going to get a check, not before Christmas, but right after. The enhancement would happen there over the holidays. And so I'm quite certain, knowing those 5 board members the way I know them, that Desmond Blackburn, rightfully so, was the farthest thing from their mind. They were thinking rank and file employees represented by
program directors, administrative assistants.
That's who they were thinking.
Okay.
And so they did the right thing, the courageous thing, and voted to approve that, right? Because of something else they did that I'm blessed and honored that they did several months ago, was making modifications to my contract. I became one of those 790 employees, right? And so then I became the recipient of that 1.5% raise as well. I don't believe that's not what that board was trying to do. Again, they weren't thinking about me, and on that night, they shouldn't have been thinking about me. So good people trying to do a good thing for some other really, really good people, right? And so I got caught in the mix. And so the give back, wasn't a question. But I will tell you, thankfully, have friends and colleagues and advisors that helped me come up with, hey, why not try to do something positive for our teachers? And the supply zone over at Clear Lake, sponsored by our foundation, Brevard Foundation, I think is a great opportunity to put resources in a pot so that teachers don't have to go to Walmart or Target, as we know that many of them do, to buy supplies for children who, quite honestly, can't afford themselves. And so the supply zone exists, and it's an awesome place. I've been there several times, and so took advantage of the opportunity to do that. And by the way, Matt, I'm hoping other people follow suit and contribute, other community leaders contribute to the supply zone for the foundation.
What kind of reaction have you gotten from that?
Honestly, so yeah, mixed. I've certainly received texts and emails that are very, very positive and very, very thankful and appreciative. And there's been a mix. So there have been some emails or texts or social media postings that aren't as flattering, and that's okay, right? The pot that supplies an opportunity for teachers got $3,300 richer, and I'm hoping it'll get even wealthier.
The same day that the Florida Today had a front page story about you donating a raise for the school supplies, also BPS put out a news release about graduation rates.
Yes.
Although I guess it looks like they've dipped by about a percentage point.
Sure.
Year over year. BPS has still the highest graduation rate among the 10 biggest school districts in Florida. From the point of view of a manager and an educator, what do you make of that?
I remember that evening well, and I remember feeling really bad that I was on the front page, or I don't have a hard copy of the newspaper, but I felt really bad that there was a headline featuring me, featuring increased compensation to me, and not highlighting the reason why we're all here, our kids. Graduation rates came out, as you said, still leader of all large districts, right? Still very proud of our graduation rate, but there was a dip there by over a percentage point, right? We still lead the state. The state's on a 14-year high, but I don't ever want to go backwards, just to be honest with you.
Right.
We're still doing a great job, so we're second out of all school districts in the state with college career readiness. Okay, and so those same senior cohort, along with their teachers and parents and community support, earned those performance indicators, right? But celebrating the positive and refocusing us on where we still need to grow should have been the focus that evening, and not this.
How do you grow a graduation rate? I know that's a big question, but I'm not an educator, and is there some topping out point where they're just people who don't want to go to high school, or are there things that we do to really just kind of percentage point by percentage point grow opportunity and get more kids diplomas?
It's the latter. We keep growing opportunities. If you can imagine the combination lock, right? You can imagine, you keep turning until you crack the code on each and every kid. Part of it is access and opportunity. Part of it is schools and parents, teachers and principals and district staff just monitoring, rolling your sleeves up, and just knowing the status of each and every kid across every cohort, across this district, what they've earned, where the gaps are, what we still need to do, what the kid still needs to do, what the family still needs to do. It's a machine that has to operate, right, in a flawless kind of way. And so there's always room to grow. We're high, and conceptually speaking, yes, it's difficult the higher you perform to maintain and to grow. But I will tell you, Matt, in doing the math, we're about at 85, just under 86%, about 5,000 students per year. You do that math, and there's no one who wants their child to be in the percentage that didn't make it. So I think we all want to see that get to 100%, and we have to keep working our butts off, to be quite honest with you, until we get there.
When we come back, Brevard School Superintendent spent months on a listening and learning tour, what he heard from you and your neighbors.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot Debit Card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring today's program. Our guest today is Brevard School Superintendent Desmond Blackburn. You spent months doing town hall meetings around Brevard. You've done meetings at Rotary clubs and civic organizations to listen and learn. So what have you learned in the past, 6 months or so?
Sure. Well, before I even go there, thank you to everyone that let me in, came out. Were very, very candid with their conversations. Some of the feedback I get sometimes, or questions, is whether or not students or even teachers are going to be candid with me. And I'm going to tell you, Matt, folks have been very candid with me, and I appreciate all of it, right? And so start with the most talked about, sort of the most obvious, yes, constant pressure, rightfully so, to increase compensation. Okay, so that's one piece that I hear many, many places that I attend. I also hear we have to do better in some of our support areas, right? I hear that the software that teachers are working on to help support our students with disabilities, I hear very regularly that that's a pain point for the system, so we have to do better. I hear very regularly, while we are meeting our class size average numbers, it is an average. Okay, so do the math, and we know we're on target in some areas, we are under target in some areas, but we are above target, and we meet our average. But there are some places with pain points, and so I've heard the plea: hey, while you've made the numbers, can we get some support here in our classrooms? Can we get additional teacher assistants? Can we just get more teachers, right? Definitely hear that plea. Security. I hear security conversation quite a bit. All of our secondary schools have armed SROs. A small handful of our elementary schools have armed SROs, largely because of partnerships with the sheriff's office and several other municipalities in the district, Titusville, Rockledge, the Cape, places like that. We have great partnerships, and those cities saw the opportunity to help us out there along with the sheriff's office. I hear those things. I hear that we need to continue to work towards, greater community and parent involvement. We've heard over the years that we need to continue to fine-tune, and we made an attempt this year, continue to fine-tune our disciplinary practices in schools to make sure we're consistent, make sure we're firm, make sure we're fair, and things of that nature. So I hear a lot, and it's just been great opportunity.
So what specifically do you do with that feedback? Do you turn that into marching orders for people, or does it just kind of go into a notebook someplace?
Well, the notebook is actually the first stop. So it goes in. Most people who have attended one of these events with me, I have that little black book and I write in it. And sometimes I can actually read my handwriting. And so when I can actually read my handwriting, that information gets put on a spreadsheet that senior staff and I discuss on a very regular basis, the board members and I discuss. We try to rank, if you will, and prioritize, if you will, everything that we're hearing. And then there's Resource Day, right? There's the conversation with our chief financial officer, and there's, let's, is it Jerry Maguire? Like, show me the money,
right,
kind of thing. So we have all these priorities, and then we take a look at our resources, and we do the best we can to apply limited resources to priorities as articulated to us by our community.
Let's move on here a little bit.
Sure.
One of the things that I interview a lot of mayors on this program, other city leaders, and I always ask them, how do you size up your relationship with Brevard Public Schools?
Okay.
So let's turn it about a little bit.
Sure.
Things weren't always good with the city and county here in Brevard County. From what you've seen, how would you size up, from the superintendent's point of view, our relationships with the cities and the county that we deal with?
Matt, this brings me to, and there have been many, but this brings me to one of the many, many blessings I've received in the last couple of years. From Palm Bay to Titusville, Mims, the Cape, Rockledge, Melbourne, you name West Melbourne, you name the city and the county, city managers, mayors, councilwomen and men, they have been, to say they've been gracious and warm would be an understatement, right? And so I've been very appreciative of the relationships built with our local leaders, and can't do this job without them. We've gone through several hurricanes and things. Like, I couldn't do this without their support and their help, and it really makes a difference to have the relationships with those leaders. So entirely grateful. I see it as a positive.
Well, it's a small listening and learning tour here in the studio, but I also ask everyone, including business leaders, if you could change or improve one thing about Brevard Public Schools from their perspective, what would it be? Okay. All right, so let's turn that around again.
Sure.
Superintendent Blackburn, if you could change or improve one thing about Brevard County, or the city where you live, what would it be?
Change or improve. We're at a point now, and maybe we've been at this point for a very, very long time, but we're at a point now to not only have internal conversation about what educators mean to the community that we occupy, and whether or not the resources are adequate to support the functions and the people, right? It's not just an internal conversation, but we really need to have that conversation. Our staff, our teachers, our educators, counselors, administrators, custodians, clerical bus drivers, they all mean a lot to the community, and we're all residents, and so we want to do that, but none of this is free, right? And so just love to expand the conversation around perhaps meeting, right, function with resource, right, and just having that conversation if we can. Outside of that, and again, I'm not a fan of divisive conversation. You've talked about my hashtag, right? People, process, performance. People, our relationship, serves as the foundation. We have zero opportunity, in my humble opinion, to get to increased performance without those relationships, right? And so definitely don't want to say or do anything divisive, but perhaps it is time for a more community-wide kind of global conversation around that.
I think I've heard you say that if a poorly performing school can bring down property values, then surely if property values are going up, it must have something to do with high-performing schools, and therefore what?
Absolutely, man. And so that brings me to something that's probably at the top of my agenda each and every time I travel to Tallahassee, and that is the conversation around the local required effort. For 2 years in a row, that local required effort has been rolled back.
The property tax, right?
Property tax, right? And that's a good thing for Desmond, Blackburn, and Matt Reed, the taxpayer. Those are good things, right? But those are our coffers. That's our fund in order to drive our organization. And so as property values go down, clearly we understand, our employees understand, that resources go with it. Mm-hmm. But as property values go up, and as more and more people decide that the Space Coast, Brevard County, is the place to move into, to build, to live, learn, work, and play, as those property values go up and we're not able to benefit financially from that experience, it's a tough pill to swallow, Matt. It really is. And so I empathize with what our teachers are going through, right? Go back to 08, 09. Listen, they understood what was going on in the economy at that time, and so many, 3-4 years in a row at 0% increase. I get it. I see where their frustration is. Now, we're not on easy street, but we're not 08, 09 either, right? We're not 9, 10. Property values have increased. People are moving back in. They're building like everywhere. And to not be able to leverage those resources to invest back into the school system and the people of the school system is a pain point.
We'll have to leave it at that.
Okay.
Superintendent Desmond Blackburn, thank you so much for joining us in the studio today.
Matt, thank you very much.
Well, that's our program. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring Brevard Watch. We'll see you next week on Spectrum Channel 496 and on YouTube, #Brevard Watch.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.